Hey,
right.
Rosie. Good to
Hi,
speak to you.
Joe.
I've got such fond memories of working together on episode 8. Was
Yeah.
that it was episode 8, right? Or was it Rogue One?
I did Rogue One and 8
Yeah,
because we rolled one right into the other.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It was great. Yeah, you'd always lift the morale and good spirits and tell us. I remember too telling us fairy tale stories while we were
Oh,
sat
yeah.
making.
I remember the first time you told me to tell you a fairy tale, and I did, and you were like, "How do you
I
know
did.
this?"
It was just a joke, but you had him like perfectly.
Yeah, that was a
Yeah,
good team. I
yeah,
enjoyed working on that show, though it was a little bit too much sanding for my usual tastes.
yeah. You did really well to keep your morale level, high. Considering, yeah, you did have one of the most monotonous jobs.
Oh, it was
Very
so.
valuable. Someone needed to do it, but yeah, no, well done.
Well, yeah, I mean, thank goodness the bosses let me listen to my headphones all day, because if they had not, I would have gone absolutely over the edge.
Yeah,
But I listened to a lot of podcasts, a
yeah,
lot of music, just kind of keeping my head on straight.
yeah.
But yeah,
But yeah, and there's a lot of parts that were coming from the mold room, wasn't it? That just
oh,
taking all the rough edges off and things like that.
yeah,
And yeah,
yeah, so much.
mm,
And then I ended up cataloging all the molds at the end of the show, and it was just like, I think there ended up being like there was thousands of molds. I want to say there was 2,000 molds at the end of episode 8, but
wow,
I mean, it was a long time ago now. It's all a blur. It
yeah,
was
I
four
know.
years ago.
What
Four
the
years
hell?
ago. I know. And you look exactly the same,
Yes, same to
except
you.
you have less rashes. You and I both remember we got
Yeah, we were.
got sensitivities to the super glue or something.
Yeah,
Oh, it was so bad.
it's so hard to place it in. I guess this is the other side of the industry that doesn't get talked about. Is just all of the cocktail of different chemicals, whether it's spray paints, whether it's super
Yeah,
glues, whether it's activators, whether it's
I know.
the urethanes that and
Mm,
all the resins that are in the different whatever it is, plastics or that we're
yeah.
sanding and turn into particles, or even MDF dust or plywood
Ugh,
dust, and
yeah,
there's a whole cocktail of things floating around those little dusty sheds,
yeah,
and of course it's great fun, and the things we were making were awesome and inspiring,
yeah.
but it does take a hit on your
It
health,
really
especially if you have
does.
sensitive skin. Yeah.
And as you know, I'm in Canada, and we have a union here. And one of the things that the union does is whenever a union member or former union member, like a retired union member, dies, the union sends out a notification. And there's a lot of construction guys who die in their early 60s or in their 50s. And I
Oh.
would not be surprised if it's MDF dust. But
Mm.
like a lot of the younger guys, a lot of people who are still working in construction, do wear respirators and masks and stuff to keep out the MDF dust. But it's always a little worrying when you start seeing trends like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and unfortunately, yeah, as much as you can wear PPE as much as you can, but there are times where if you're in it, working with a team, it does become a bit of a hindrance in terms of communication and things like that.
Yeah,
So you
or
can't have
even
it on 100% of the time. Yeah.
or even some productions can't afford spray booths, and so
Yeah.
you're doing chemical work out in the parking lot, which, I mean, big open spaces are good, but it's not as good as a spray booth. So yeah,
Yeah.
you do get exposed more than is delightful.
Yeah. The positive side of that is people are slowly waking up to it, and we are getting better and better at that.
Very
As
true.
or where I'm working at Weta, they are probably the most aware and doing the best they can for all of those sorts of things. So that is a positive thing to see that change
Yeah,
coming through. But there are so much to deal with that it is a hard thing to tackle for companies, because it's a very
yeah,
expensive thing to deal with.
it is. It's
Um, yeah. But on the positive side of that, I guess Yeah, it was a really memorable experience working on those films with you.
Yeah,
Um,
you too.
what led you to that point as well? Where were you working before?
Uh, do you want like the lead up from when I was a toddler up until Star Wars?
Yes. Well, no, whatever you're comfortable with. Yeah.
Well, I did my training in technical theater,
Oh, cool.
and I kind of knew I wanted to do something in the entertainment industry because I've always been a maker and like I've always been in that world. I kind of grew up in the theater and grew up with two artistic parents and stuff. So I went to school for technical theater,
Hmm.
and I didn't really know, I hadn't gotten into props then, and I didn't really know what path within the theater I wanted to pursue. So after college, I did a couple of years freelancing in the theater circuit in Calgary, Alberta. And while I was there, I was living with my friend Tyne, who was dating her now husband, Steve. And Steve, Steve was a prop builder. And I've always, as I've said, I always want to makers. So he was like, he would come over and see what I was building in the living room and say, "Oh, you should come put in your resume at the prop shop because I think you'd be really good at it." So I thought, "Oh, sure, whatever. I could always do with more work." So I did, and I ended up getting hired there to do some part-time work. And I ended up realizing that I was really good at it, to be totally arrogant. I was
Yeah.
really good at it, and I really liked it. So I was like, this is it. This is it forever. So I worked in theater in props for a number of years, and then kind of right after the recession, when all the grant money for theaters was drying up, they cut my position by quite a lot, to the point where I couldn't live off props anymore. And I thought, oh, this sucks. If I'm unemployed, I might as well be unemployed closer to film places. So I moved to
Mm.
Vancouver. I did some theater out here until I ended up, I got my union paperwork together and stuff because, as you know, Canada is union. And one of my old theater friends was already out here doing film work. And then Warcraft came to town and they set up a local shop, which was not really the practice at the time. And they needed a bunch of builders. And so my friend thought, oh, Rosie's in town. She likes all that medieval fantasy stuff. So they called me up, had all my paperwork in order, and so they hired me on. And then I did that show. At the end of it, I thought, you know what? I'm going to go to England. And I had met a woman on the show named Lou, who was working out in England. She'd come over with the horse armor from the prop shop in London.
Hmm.
And so when I went to London, I looked her up. She said, "Oh yeah, we're doing the Teletubbies build right now. Do you want to come build for Teletubbies?" And I was like,
Sure.
"I'll do like, literally anything for money, sure." And so I did the Teletubbies build for whatever, I can't remember, 6 weeks or 8 weeks or something, and that was fine. But then, of course, every job comes to an end.
Yeah.
And I took a job on a Disney cruise ship, which is not really my job. It was not a good fit for me. It was a very good fit for other people, but it was not a very good fit for me. So
That's fair enough.
yeah, putting in my resignation there, and I was like, I gotta get back on production. Went back,
And on
kind of
dry
called
land.
back on dry land, right? And the walls didn't move.
Mm.
And I called up some of my contacts I'd made on Teletubbies, and one of them gave me the number for Mark, the props. What was he? Props supervisor? Oh, what
Mark
the hell?
Rocker was our HOD, prop making HOD. Yeah.
Well,
Head
there
of
we go.
department. Yeah,
Yeah. The hierarchy and like the departments are split up a little bit different between England and Canada. So
yeah.
I am a little confused about
Yeah.
props, set deck, hand props, weapons, that kind of thing. Anyway.
Yeah. It seems to be different every film anyway. But for Rogue One, Jamie Wilkinson was the prop master, and then he
Right.
hired Mark to oversee the make side of it.
Right.
Or at least the
Yeah.
the bits that we were working on.
Yeah. Um, yeah, a girl named Ellie gave me Mark's number and said, "Oh, you need someone to sand things for a couple of weeks. Can you sand stuff for a
Couple of
couple of weeks?"
weeks, Rosie.
Yeah,
Couple of
I
weeks.
know.
Ah, yeah, I can do it for a
It was
couple of
supposed to
weeks.
be like it was. I don't remember how long the original agreement was for. It was for a couple of weeks, and I thought, you know, I'd been building for quite a while by that point, so I was like, "Ugh, I don't really want to go sand stuff, but you could do anything for a couple of weeks.
Couple of
You
weeks.
could dig a couple of ditches for a couple of weeks, you know, clean mold for a couple of weeks or whatever, as long as a paycheck's at the end of it. Anyway, a couple of weeks ended up being like over a year. So, yeah. Anyway, so that's how I ended up on Rogue One. And then number 8. That was fun, though. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of great people.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, yeah, like I say, they kept you because everyone liked you and you were doing a good job and maybe, you know. But they did, unfortunately that was a job that needed doing and yeah,
Yeah,
unfortunately there was no getting out of it because
true.
they needed, yeah, they needed
I should
that
have done a
job
worse
doing.
job.
Yeah, exactly.
Done a worse job. Maybe they would have bumped me out of it faster.
Yeah, yeah.
Or maybe not. Oh well. Supposed to go work on The Revenant, but then, as with many film things, there was a gigantic shuffle. There was a new prop master, there was shortened deadlines and smaller budgets, and they said, "Oh, you know, I did a little bit of work, kind of freelance work for The
Hmm.
Revenant, but in the end, I was like, I gotta go. I can't be sitting here waiting for a maybe job when I could go be adventuring somewhere else." So I ended up leaving then. So it left me with I think a year and 10 months ultimately. Um, yeah, I wish I could have stayed longer. I wish I could have stayed to the crew party. Man,
We the crew party was pretty crazy, but actually will say that your and Damo's leaving party was probably the best party we had as a group of crew. That was
that
one of
was
my fondest memories of a night out
I
in
love
London
that.
actually. Yeah,
Really? Oh,
yeah,
that's
that's
sweet.
definitely top. One of the top memories of that. Yeah, that was such a
Oh,
good night. Like we yeah
it was a really great night. It was
yeah.
really That's one of my favorite parties I think I've ever been to.
Yeah, because both like say yourself and Demo are very well loved characters, so literally everyone came out for it, and then everyone was in very high spirits, and we just kept going through the night, and we just kept going to these different places, and it was so good. Yeah, I think that's where Miguel and Sophie got together, and for the first time
Awesome.
and things like that. So like, yeah,
Awesome.
it was a good night for a lot of people, I think.
Good. I'm so glad.
Hmm. Um, so then, yeah, so you headed back to Canada after that, is that right?
I did, yep. My visa ended. Your country kicked me out. Queen
Sorry.
personally came down to the airport and made sure I left. It's terrible. Anyway, went back to Canada, bummed around, did a little freelance work at a special effects shop. Then I built for season 1 of Altered Carbon,
Hmm.
which was a really good experience. Really fantastic team on that.
Yeah, it's cool. Definitely a cool show. Very sci-fi. Lots of like interesting stuff
Hmm.
too. I bet. Yeah.
Yeah, so many guns. Like, you have no idea how many guns we made for that show.
Yeah.
It was really amazing. And the sets were like, the set that they used for all the street scenes, they actually built it. And I know, it was unbelievable. Like, it was like, I can't even. I'm speechless. I know we're
Mm.
supposed to be describing things, but I'm
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
speechless. Um,
Was it an outdoor one then, Rosie? That
no, it was indoor. It was
indoor?
entirely
Wow.
indoor.
Mm.
They took over, of course, because print is dead. So the old newspaper printing factory,
Hmm.
um, they took that over and turned it into sound stages.
Excellent.
And the street scene it was really long. I don't know the exact dimensions, but it was like a 3-story high or 4-story high room, that was really long and narrow. It was where the old printing presses used to work, and it had an added benefit that because of that, there was drainage all in the bottom, so they could actually make it rain indoors. So that is practical rain that you see in Altered Carbon Season 1.
Excellent.
Yeah, which was also funny too because our shop was kind of underneath that set, and so they had tanks, big water tanks underneath to catch all the rain, and they had special effects technicians at each tank. So you could hear like all this rushing water right outside the shop door. These technicians making sure that the valves were running and nothing was overflowing and stuff. So we never had any floods or anything. It was all very well done, very good special effects. But
those sets end up getting very damp and very quite stinky in the end. Everyone should rinse them through water.
It's not bad. I don't know how they managed it, but like it was. I think it probably helped that there wasn't much to retain the water. Like the ground was like concrete and steel. The walls were mostly styrofoam or steel or, heavily coated and stuff. And so there wasn't much to waterlog and get stinky. So that was very lucky.
Good.
Yeah, but it was a really, really beautiful set. It makes me so sad that it's gone now, but all things must pass.
Yeah, the amount of sets that come and go. Yeah, even the ones that we saw for Rogue One and Episode 8. Yeah.
So
it's
amazing.
It's a shame that the public don't get to visit some of these places, but yeah, it's nice when they do keep them, and the Harry Potter studio tour is a pretty good example of that. And over here, the Hobbiton movie set, if you ever come over, Rosie, I'll take you there.
I'm totally going to come over there, Joe. Hopefully before you leave. I promised my cousins I'll come for Christmas, so if I do, I'll come and visit you.
I can't go there often enough. I would definitely live there if I could. So after Altered Carbon?
After Altered Carbon, I worked on a movie called Noelle, Disney one. It's available on Disney Plus.
Yeah, cool. Check it out.
Yep. Then I'm so bad at remembering things. It's all a blur. So
That's
I'm
all
glad
good. Whatever comes to mind. Yeah.
I'm glad there's IMDb because I would never remember anything.
Yeah.
What did I do after that? I think I worked on season 1 of Sabrina. The Sabrina the Teenage Witch reboot that's filming here in town. I did season 1 of that, or I think I did the first 10 episodes, which was very interesting. The sets on that one too, like I was a little disappointed watching the show just because you couldn't see very much of the sets because it's so dark and moody and stuff. I mean, it was beautiful for what it was, but having seen the sets in full light, they're so beautiful, and the set decoration department did such a good job on that show. And they designed all their own wallpaper for that show too, which does happen fairly often. Like if you noticed in Altered Carbon in the Raven Hotel, they had custom Escher style crow wallpaper.
That's cool. Yeah.
It's super cool. It's like you kind of see flashes of it in the background, but if you actually look at it, it's the crows going up, and it's really beautiful. And Sabrina had kind of the same thing, not Escher specifically, but like they designed all their own wallpaper and stuff, and it's just mind-boggling to think that Sabrina's house is actually on a sound stage, because it looks like a real house and it's worn in like a real house, and there's dust in the corners and there's dirt in all the crevices, and there's potting soil on the floor. Like it looks like it's lived in, but it was all placed there by the set deck team, and they're just they're so amazing.
It's amazing the amount of things that look like real life there are actually sets for these things. So you wouldn't question it when you're watching these things. That is someone's job to make that reality. Sometimes they do film on location, they do film in real houses, but if it's something that they're going to use over and over, like Sabrina probably filmed a lot in that house,
Yeah, and they still do. They're still, well, they're obviously not filming right now because it's the end of the world, but they film they film a lot in that house. So yeah, I'm sure it's still there exactly as I remember it from season 1.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Nice.
And then after that, I went on to a show called C, which is on the Apple Network, and it's got Jason Momoa in it, and that was good, but it was a very big change from Sabrina because I'd gone from Sabrina, which is all gothy stuff and like spell books and daggers and torture things and all this kind of fun stuff. I really like building that stuff, to C, which is 300 years post-apocalypse, and everyone's using sticks and rocks and bone knives and stuff, so it was a really big jump. But it was a great team, and really, that's all you can ask for, is a great team to work with, good boss, and someone who sends you home on time in the evening.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes the day-to-day, because the other thing, often when you look back on any film, even if it was really hard at the time, you do look back at it with fond memories, but living in the present on some of them, like the things like you just said, people, being sent home on time and not doing overtime every day, of course, obviously there'll be some rushes that come through, but yeah, if you can have a life outside of work, that is a really nice thing, it's very much appreciated.
I was just thinking when we were talking yesterday and you asked me to talk to you today, just thinking about funny stories I could tell about productions. And there was one I remember on Star Wars. I don't remember if it was Rogue One or number 8. I think it was probably Rogue One, but whatever, it doesn't matter. But my commute was so long. I was living in North London, and as you know, Pinewood Studios is like super duper west. And I had to leave in the morning. My first bus was at 4:50 a.m. in order to be at work by 7. It was just like, but this is what I want to do. I don't have any kids. I don't have a husband. I recently got my first house plant, so that's going well.
Yeah, nice.
But so I had this massively long commute. And, it was only supposed to be for a few weeks, and you can do any sort of terrible commute for a few weeks, right? And then a few weeks turned into a few months, turned into whatever. And so I had this massively long commute, which meant that I was getting very little sleep at night. Very, very little sleep at night. And I'm very good at, like, hitting the ground running when my alarm clock goes off, and I'm very good at getting to bed on time, but I really was getting probably 6 hours of sleep a night. And so I needed a nap in the middle of the day. And in the summertime, I would go out to the gardens out the back of Pinewood because there was lots of bushes to curl up under, which there was a lot of people who did that. Lots of people napping in the park. But when it was raining, I would go up into the boardroom that was in front of our boss, Mark Rocca's office. And there was like a table there, a big long conference table there, but people hardly were ever up there. It was like file cabinets full of files and this big long table, and it was really dark because someone had papered over the windows. So I would climb underneath the table and I would curl up there with my headphones on with like gentle music playing, and I'd pull my hat down over my eyes, and I had like an alarm on my phone to wake me up when it was time to go back to work, and I would nap there for like 20 minutes or half an hour. So one day, I'm like curled up underneath this table. I got my hat pulled over my eyes. I got my little gentle music playing, and then my alarm clock goes off. I'm like, okay. So I roll over and I pull my hat up, and there's Mark Rocca sitting right next to my head. And he's just going through files in the cabinet looking for like a draft that we'd used like 2 weeks or 2 months previous or something. And he just looks down at me and he's like, hey. I was just like,
Mark never stops as well. He's very go. Yeah, that's good.
Go. I will say he did not make a lot of noise, so he didn't wake me up or anything.
Fair enough. Yeah. It's pretty good.
That was funny. I'm glad he wasn't mad.
Nah.
needed a lot of sleep on that show.
Yeah, luckily we did get nice long lunch breaks, like
That
hour-long
was,
lunch breaks on that one. So
yeah,
yeah, that's why I think so many people do use that time to have a nap. And yeah.
it's,
Mm.
it's good. Good. Have a little shut your brain off time.
Yeah. Speaking of shut your brain off time, how have you found quarantine so far? Have you had time to relax?
I am sleeping a lot, which is
Yeah.
good. But I really miss working. I gotta say, like I am enjoying doing my own projects. I, cleaned my toolkit. I got all my paints out. I've been doing personal projects, but I've been working so long with a production designer who kind of pulls in my creativity because I find I have 1,000 ideas and I don't know which one to start on first. And there's a
Yeah.
thousand directions each decision could go in. I
And no
don't know.
deadlines either.
There's no
So
deadlines. There's
yeah.
no deadline. There's no limitations. And
Yeah.
so, like, I'm trying really hard to complete anything.
Yeah. One
So,
thing I sorry, one thing I
yeah,
remember is you did some really beautiful like calligraphy, like medieval strips
yeah,
and things like that.
yeah.
Um, that was amazing. Was that for you, just for yourself, or was that for a project?
I I used to hang around with a medieval recreation group quite a lot, and so
Nice.
I would do stuff for them, award scrolls or like, you know, thank you cards and that sort of thing. And I've always kind of been into that kind of fiddly little stuff. I'm really
Mm,
lucky now. I get to do a fair bit of that and get paid for it. The last show that I was on, which I cannot talk about, I got to
yeah.
do a very nice project, which I really hope does not get on the cutting room floor. But uh, Altered Carbon also, I got to do quite a bit of the notes and books and yeah, journals. Do a lot of journals these days.
Awesome.
Yeah, yeah, they're
It's a
fun.
whole interesting niche that I think, like I say, all the handwritten things as well. And yeah, because
Mm.
you can't fake it. You've got to do, you can't just type it out, really.
Some
It
people do, but
yeah.
I agree. I think the handmade stuff is really what sells it. And
Mm.
personally, I can always tell when something is hand done versus something that's printed out. And I prefer the hand done, even if they age it really nicely and make it look as good as they can. It's still that evenness
Mm.
and the way the ink shines too is really distinctive. But I'm also a prop builder, so lots of things irritate me that wouldn't
Yeah.
irritate normal people.
We do have a very scrutinous sort of lens of the world, eh?
It's true. It's true. I was watching a show that I'd worked on personally recently, which I'm not going to name, but uh, there was a knife in it, and we always, of course, have to um, do rubber casts of knives, or very frequently because actors get excited when they're acting and can injure themselves on real knives. So rubber copies are the best way to go if you can do it. If not, then you have to grind that knife down to be very, very dull. But I had a rubber knife, and I'd given the actor a rubber knife for this one scene, and he was threatening somebody up against their throat, and I could tell by how hard he was pressing that it was a rubber knife.
Mm.
I hope no one else noticed. I noticed it badly, but yeah, I noticed those things. I noticed
Yeah.
rubber guns and rubber rocks and rubber
It's
knives.
movie making magic, Rosie.
It was had my disbelief.
Love it.
I
So,
actually I made a rubber knife once for a stunt guy, and he ended up cutting himself on it. It was
was that the
painful.
armature
I've
poking
never
through?
no, I've never forgotten it because I still feel terrible about it. It was on Altered Carbon, and there was some scene where the stuntman had to smash something with the hilt of a knife, and I mean, of course, it was at the end of a big long fight scene, so all the knives were rubber, and it was going to be like breakaway plastic, glass, whatever. So it didn't need a lot of effort. So I cast out this knife, and I hadn't rounded off the seam line enough, and it felt like it was enough to me, but because of how hard he was hitting and everything, he ended up running his hand down the seam of the knife and cutting his hand quite badly. And I'll never forget it, Joe. And now I'm super paranoid that another actor's going to get hurt with one of my props.
Nice. So now all your props have got really round corners. They look like, what do they call them? Like early learning center, like kids' toy. Thing is, they won't, most of the time we're required to do nice crisp edges, and, it's quite kind of counterintuitive to round things off like that. But
well, there was another story, if you have time for another story.
Go for it.
In Altered Carbon, the actor who played Elliot, I had a knife for him. I was making a knife for him, and one of the things when you're making rubber knives, of course, is you want to have it's stiff enough that it looks like a real knife, but soft enough that if somebody gets stabbed with it, then they're not going to get hurt. But we were having some problems with the knives that were showing up for us to be rubberized, that the knives they were choosing were longer and longer and thinner. I had like perforations down the blade and like all these complicated things that were like, how are we going to make these safe? And I got this knife for the Elliot character that was massive. It was like 18 inches long or something. I might be exaggerating. I like to exaggerate, mostly for the story. And it was very thin. It was very thin. It was like, I want to say it was less than a 1/4 inch thick, like the blade. And it had to be rubberized. And so I did a couple of different tests to try and like get a stiffener in there to see if I could do something with the rubber. I couldn't get anything to work. Everything was just flopping around. I ordered new rubber. I tried different rubber, and it was worse. I ended up with a knife that was like, it was a flag. It was like a flag with a handle. It was terrible. So that didn't work. So finally we ended up using this plastic that generally is very stiff, and it's also very flexible, so you could actually bend the entire knife in half and it would kind of go back to normal. And that was our best solution with the time we had, with the materials we had. So cast out 6 of these knives, and you could fold it. You could fold it right in half and it wouldn't break.
Wow. So is that plastic being laid into the mold like an armature, or is that what you're making it out of?
That was what I was making it out of.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, so it was a casting plastic. It's one called 65D, the flexible, smooth-on product. And so I cast out a bunch of these knives, and I was like, great, these are going to be fine. Like, he's not going to be slashing. I don't think he slashed anyone with it. It was mostly, I can't remember. It was a long time ago now, but it was going to be in his holster. And so we didn't want, and there was going to be a big wrestling scene and fighting scene, and we didn't want him to get stabbed in the leg and whatever. Anyway, so first day on set, before lunch, our on-set prop guy comes back to the shop, and he hands me 2 pieces of this knife. And I look at him, I was like, how did this happen? It was completely snapped. I was like, you can fold this plastic in half. How did he break it? And it turned out he had some scene where he kind of got punched off a chair, I think, and the knife ended up getting hooked into the chair, and just the shock of it bending so fast and the way that it bent, it snapped in half. I was like, you know what? I'm going to give you an unbreakable knife. So I went into I usually keep a box of rejected casts under my desk, just stuff that didn't work, just, for future reference or to do paint tests on or whatever. So I still had that knife that was like a flag with a handle on it. I still had it underneath my desk. And I pulled it out and I painted it up really quickly to look like one of the proper knives, and I sent it to set, and I was like, if he can't keep his props whole, he's going to get this. Very nice picture back of the actor Atto holding the knife very sadly. Lived through the knife. And then, of course, I sent him a real knife too. But...
Nice. That's a good story, Rosie. I like that.
Like
It's
that one
funny,
too.
eh? The rigours of
Sorry, what?
the things that are the props that we make, what they're expected to go through or required to go through, is quite,
Yeah.
a lot, for something that's made specifically for that film. It's not a product that's been out there, that's been, prototyped and developed over, many years and then mass produced. Like this is all done, within the space of a couple of weeks from where you got the drawing to get it getting it on set. So to have the, the requirements of filming are quite, there's a lot to ask, for these sorts of things.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I've got another one, but it's a little bit dirty.
Yeah.
Are you allowed to say dirty things on your
Sure.
pod?
Yeah. Got any kids?
So one day my boss comes in and he goes, Rosie, I want you to make a cherry stem penis. And I said, what? And he said, how people put cherry stems in their mouth and they turn it into a knot. I want you to do that, but I want the knot to look like a penis. And I said, okay, this boss is a little well known for practical jokes. He likes a good practical joke. So I was like, is he joking? But we're in the movie industry and you never know what you're going to get, right? So he said, I'm not joking. I want a penis cherry stem.
Nice.
So
Which movie is this for, Rosie?
This was for Altered Carbon for season 1. Nice. But I think it ended up being cut. Or at least I never saw it. So I think it did get cut in the end. But he said, I want this cherry stem penis. I said, okay, sure, whatever. Buyers went out, bought me a couple of jars of maraschino cherries so I could try it with the real thing. Turns out real cherry stems don't work very well because, of course, they dry out really quickly and they don't bend super well. And when you're trying to do a complicated knot like that, it's not super good. Anyway, so generally the rule of thumb, as you know, is you give them 3 options. 3 options is enough to have one you like, one you hate, and one you go with. You don't really want to do more than 3 options. If they really hate all 3, then you take them away, you do another 3, come back, give them 3 more, So I did up a couple of samples, and my boss on that show was amazing at getting props approved. Very, very rarely did we get props sent back, which is really unusual. Normally you go through several remakes of something until the people upstairs are happy with it. But he was really good at getting things approved. So when my penis samples came back and they were all rejected, I was like, what? Okay. And they said, they want the shaft thicker, they want the balls to be tilted down, they want this, they want that. I was like, how am I going to do this? Like, I only have a finite length before it becomes unbelievable. And I did it with one stem, and then I did like a double stem one. I ended up having to go with a triple stem, like cherry stem, which I ended up making them out of bits of string and dipped in a food-grade silicone called dragon skin, which I tinted red to look like maraschino cherry juice. Anyway, so I'd been doing these, and I did a lot of them. I did at least 5 unique penis-shaped cherry stem knots. Nice. And it got to the point where my boss was like, we can't be wasting any more time on this. Like, they have to choose something. They can't just keep saying no. So I need you to go and work on this other project that we need done, and we'll revisit this later. I said, okay, fine. But it was eating at me now. It at me, Joe. And
The penis was eating at you. The penis problem. Just can't stop thinking about the penis problem.
My dreams. So I remember like laying in bed the morning before I had to go to work. And, you know, it's that kind of that point where you don't have to get out of bed yet and you're not quite out of your dreams yet. And you're just kind of like laying there and just like being warm. And I was just kind of turning this thing over in my head. And I realized the solution. I was like, that's it. So I went into work and I did up one final knot. And I did the thing and I took it over to my boss. And my boss's office is kind of around the corner from our shop. I went over to him with this thing in my hands, and he looks at me and he says, Rosie, I thought I told you to stop working on that. And I said, yeah, I know, but I was laying in bed this morning, and I got an idea for the way that it should go. And he goes, oh, okay, sure. Let me take it upstairs and see if they like it. So he takes the penis from me. And this thing is only it's like an inch high, 2 centimeters high. He takes it from my hands in his cup head, and he goes running up to the showrunner's office. He shows this thing off, and he comes down. He comes into the shop, and he's like, success! It's the one!
Yes.
And I ended up doing, I don't know, like 6 copies of it just to be safe. And I think it got left on the cutting room floor. Or at least I don't remember seeing it in the show, so maybe someone else figured it out.
That's so good. Nice. I'm glad I've heard the story of Rosie's 1-inch penis now. 1-inch cherry.
I never did find who was being so particular about that penis.
Sure.
I have wonders. I've always wondered, but I never found out.
So good. That's a good place to leave it, I think, Rosie. That's so good to speak to you, and thank you for telling us all those wonderful stories.
Oh, you're very welcome, Joe.
Just like good old times. And
just like good old times.
Yeah. I stay safe for the rest of the lockdown, and hopefully speak to you again when this is all relatively back to normal.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
All right.
Nice one.
Take care.
Nice one, Rosie. Yeah. Thank you.
Bye, Joe.
Bye.